Anacortes City Council meeting of 10 January 2022. Ms. Hunt, would you take the roll?
Mr. Carter?
Present.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mr. Walters?
Here.
Ms. Cleland-McGrath?
Here.
Ms. Moulton?
Here.
Mr. McDougall?
Here.
Ms. Hubick?
Here.
Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, just one housekeeping item. I need to remove item 8B and other business from our agenda tonight. Not quite ready to present that one. And then we're going to move into we're on item number 3 now. We're going to move into a closed session, 3A, collective bargaining topics per RCW 42.30.144B. This will be 30 minutes and no action will be taken. So we'll be back in council chambers at 6:30 for after the closed session. Thanks. Okay, we're back in session. The executive session is closed and no action was taken. All right, we're on to number 4, announcements and committee reports. So I know there's a lot of announcements and committee reports, and we have a long meeting, so I'll try to be short, but I've got a few announcements. First one is on our trash pickup. I appreciate all the great work that was done to pick up trash, to include double pickup on Thursday and triple pickup last Friday. We picked up an extra 14 dump truckloads of extra garbage. It's a big week. I realize that Waste Management was unable to provide service on Thursday due to the snow. So Waste Management has let us know they will pick up 3 times the amount this Thursday, the 13th, for missing that service. And I got to put out a number of thank yous again. I'll go through the list for the double pickup. Chris Graham, Jimmy Baker, Pete Farrell, Aaron Castro, Olay, Linbo, Joe Ferris from the Water Department, Joe Schreibert from Fiber, AJ Yost from Parks, Brandon Kruger, Sky Guthrie, both from Parks, and from the Street Department, Brandon Lowry, Saban Williamson, Ken Hargett, Jason Tosteson, and Dan Jones and Lance Jordan. And Dan Jones drew the short straw because he had to go out with our Public Works Director, slinging the trash. So I think Mr. Buckenmeyer's back is okay, but he was out there on the west side picking up trash with the crews. Eric Pierce, Brandon Dow, Brett Smolsnick, John Kramer, Tanner McLaughlin. So again, thanks to the great work they did making up for some lost ground, and we appreciate that work. The next announcement, where am I? We will have our next council meeting will be on Tuesday the 18th. That's because the 17th is Martin Luther King Day, and I'll just read a brief little snippet there. On January 17th, 2022, is Martin Luther King holiday will mark the 27th anniversary National Day of Service. This day was established to honor the life and legacy of Dr. King and to encourage all Americans to volunteer to improve their communities. The City of Anacortes encourages all citizens to be of service, engage with our community, and support one another while honoring the legacy of Dr. King. And there are so many inspirational quotes from Dr. King. I picked one that it seems appropriate for the times we're in now. And I'll pick this short one from Dr. King. We must build dikes of courage to hold back the flood of fear. All right, so now more announcements and committee boards. COVID-19 update. Again, trying not to fill our time with announcements from me because this is your meeting and I respect council's time. But just a couple of stats, 78.3% 12 and up in Skagit County have been partially vaccinated. But as we all know, there is a significant spike in cases going on. We don't need to go on the Skagit website to know that. I think everybody's being impacted there. So I met with the hospital on Friday and their leadership to make sure that they're able to meet the needs of the community. They are, but they have some important messages, and specifically from their chief medical officer. We are definitely hitting a pretty steep peak in the pandemic, and it's just some reminders for those with COVID-19 or other illnesses. So, what do you do if you've tested positive for COVID? Stay home except to get medical care. Isolate yourself. Treat your symptoms. If you need to, so please don't go to the hospital to get tested. The emergency department is standing by to help those when you need medical attention, and that 911 or the ER for trouble breathing, persistent pain or pressure on the chest, new confusion, inability to wake or stay awake, pale gray or blue colored skin, lips or nail beds, depending on skin tone. So again, please don't go to the ER. Stay home, isolate, and hydrate and rest. Most people are able, and this is from the chief medical officer, not from Matt, most people are able to ride out the symptoms of COVID-19 at home. If you're positive, please isolate, rest, and stay hydrated. So a lot of stuff there, and I will move on to, unless there are any comments. So 4B now. Mr. Young,
Mayor Miller?
go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I really wanted to first start out by the comment about we need dikes of courage to hold back the flood of fear. That is so true in our society today with so many wonderful people that we have, all of us championing our country and places that we love, and sometimes it's difficult to see the commonality. And my hope is that we as a collection of people look for that commonality. It's sort of like looking for the light in the middle of darkness because it's there. In that, that's my segue to Resolution 37, the appointment of council members to committees. And what I would like to say about, as Mayor Pro Tem, in the decision I'm putting forward, the names on each of the committees. One is that, we have a new mayor, and then also we will have some changes in the public works as well. And so, it was important that we have a bit of continuity. I think the experience that comes from being in some of these committees is so important with the initiatives that we're having to face as a city. But also, there's some huge disbursements of revenues and decisions that needed to be made. And so I felt that the continuity of some of those departments was absolutely crucial. And then, in speaking about it with Mayor Miller and, of course, Ms. Swetnam, about how do we make sure everyone is informed. We have 7 members of council. The maximum we can have is 3 per committee. And so we decided thought that having a alternate would be great. That way it's always 3 persons at the meeting if the other person is interested in this whole process. And then, I went on to look at additional items that I just thought would help our city move forward. There were some minor changes. I thought that was important, and it was also important that we give Ms. Hubick an opportunity to sort of leap in as well and understand what was taking place. But one of the things that I'm hoping we can work out as a city, and of course with council and the mayor's approval, is for those bigger committees, those large committees such as finance, such as public works, those things, maybe once a month, one committee can come and do a little bit more deeper presentation to all of the 7 members, so we have sort of a basis of building the informational flow that comes from those 120 seconds or the documents that come forward. So it is a work in progress, but I assure you that it was done with thought, compassion for creativity, and the desires of each of the members to be on select committees. And so with that, I we'll just sort of put forward it to the council, I guess, if it's appropriate for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Young. And it's always a challenge to communicate from the committees to council. My hope is always for there to not be a surprise on council, or at least the committee has communicated that information, because I like to run efficient meetings, and it's hard to keep track of all the different things going on when you're one of 7 on council. So the idea of putting the alternate in there, I think, can help. So if you can't make the committee meeting, you can go. Again, we do have to follow the Open Public Meetings Act, and I think Ms. Swetnam, did you have just the opportunity to remind us about the OPMA stuff?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Miller and Mr. Young. Yeah, certainly, I think that council has some latitude to adopt procedures for the committee meetings. But as a reminder, and I know this is review for all of you, the Open Public Meetings Act requires that all meetings of the City Council happen in an open and public forum. And a meeting is any time there's a quorum of the council. So the challenges that presents on council committees are, one, if there are more than 3 people who participate in the committee meeting, there's a possibility of action happening at that meeting that violates the OPMA. The idea of having alternates, Mr. Young raised that issue. And I think one thing that's important for council to keep in mind is that there is a possibility to violate the OPMA with serial meetings, meaning a group of 3 council members may talk about one thing, and then that conversation continues in parts with other council members. So if you get to the point where there's a quorum of the council having a conversation about something, even though they've not all actually been in the room together to conduct city business. So if council chooses to move forward with the idea of alternate council members, it will be incumbent on all of you on each of those committees to make sure that there aren't serial meetings happening, so that if a council member steps in as an alternate, they come back, they report, they don't necessarily continue that discussion with their fellow council members. I recognize that that may be a challenge for council, to be able to stay within those lanes. Raise that risk and make council aware of the challenge that new structure poses. Also, it seems probably like a good time to think about making some updates to the council procedures to comply with that suggestion, which is certainly something that council can choose to do, and staff would be happy to help support that effort.
Mr. Young, and
If I
then
might, I totally agree and hear you loud and clear, Ms. Swetnam, and totally respect that. I do think that the reminder to council of that obligation to make sure that we're not having the serial meetings, which is part of the rules that we have right now. But it's just, I hear you, and so if we as council in this, my whole thought, and I'm only just putting it out with all, I hear you, I agree, this is what we need to do, we don't want a serial meeting, and we don't want to violate the rules. But with that in mind, what it really does is allow 3 members of council to be at a meeting. If I can't be there, I'll expect my update when we have those discussions, or whatever issue comes before council. But it allows 3 members of council to participate, and almost in some ways, the update that you get by being able to participate a little bit more is, I think, beneficial to the other 4 members that are not a part of that committee. I understand the dissolution of work and all of those obligations, but I just think that there are some departments when you need more than just a 120-second overview of what's taking place. Thank you.
Mr. Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. With respect to Mr. Young and Ms. Swetnam, I actually think this is a little bit more complicated. For me, compliance with our open meeting rules, our public records rule, all of the open government rules are pretty deeply held value, but even under our previous construct where we didn't have alternates, we have skated kind of close to the line, especially where staff have brought topics to more than one committee. So for example, if you've got 3 council members on one committee and 3 council members on a different committee, and there's 1 person overlap, and staff bring that conversation to 2 committees, that could be 4 people. And if it's 4 people, even though it's temporarily separated, that's a serial meeting and a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. I worry that adding the alternates in will that'll make it very difficult, just too difficult to track who's talking about what. Maybe there's a way to navigate that, but we don't currently have procedures for that. So I don't feel real comfortable doing the alternates prior to having to talking through how that would really work and having procedures to support it. I don't want the extra work of managing like who's had what conversation. I mean, it's just very simple if you are just meeting with your less than a quorum group. And we have some committees that just kind of receive information from departments and then they come to the council meeting and report it back. But then there are some other committees that, are really working on policy and recommendations and those kinds of things, that are having really interactive discussions, maybe even without a department head there. So we need to keep in mind that there's two levels of that interaction going on, and one with an alternate, but that latter type, that is not going to work, I don't think, and be compliant with the Open Public Meetings Act. Might work for that first type with some appropriate procedures, but I tend to think we should not do alternates in advance of those procedures.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton, and then Mr. Young.
Thank you. I am concerned about the repercussions of having alternates as well, especially because so many things are time sensitive and they go from meeting to meeting. These are ongoing conversations among the council members, and I think it would be very tricky to navigate and would diminish and hinder our ability to do the work that is so important to the committees.
Mr. Young.
No, I think that my fellow council members make a very valid point, and and I understand that. I do think, though, which is of critical importance, is just making sure that the other members of council are as up to date as possible. The 120 seconds normally is the 50,000 feet overview. But in some of the departments, because we're speaking so much about $100 million budget, that 7 members of council, we need to have a higher level of understanding and the discussion and thought that goes into it, not maybe at the level of the committee members, but on some of those, such as finance and public works, it is absolutely crucial. Hence, 2 things. I do think that we, as a council and our new mayor and staff, should have a retreat sooner than later. I think we should talk about that, such that things that we need to work on that can help us come together and be more informed, we can work out those details, as Mr. Walters sort of suggests in, not moving this forward, but figuring out how we're going to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act, but yet increase the other members of council's knowledge of what's really taking place. And I think that if we're voting on, as council members, on budgets and contracts and things like that, the methodology with which we get there such that all 7 members are informed is crucial. Because without it, then it's just limited. And I really feel that if members of council want more information, we have to create a way to make that happen. The alternate may not be the best approach, and I hear the valid points that you're making, but then we have to figure out how do we get there. One of the ideas is to have one of the departments, particularly finance or public works, come to council for a 20, 30-minute presentation, alternatively, once a month. One comes this month, another comes the next. And it sort of allows us to be more informed. Does that increase the workload on staff? Yes, it does. But the question really comes down to is if we're informing council at the level we need to make the decisions we need to, then it is something that's important. Thank you.
Ms. Cleland.
Yeah, thank you. I think the idea of having an alternate seems worthy. I have a real problem with the appearance of transparency and the importance of open public meetings. I mean, that is what we all know is very of the highest importance for the public, and I want to maintain that level of trust. If folks start to feel like there is some serial meetings happening, it's going to open up a can of worms, whether it's turning over emails or phone records and all of that. So I think it's really important that we don't have alternates and kind of this gray area of who shows up and what if 4 people show up, because someone doesn't know they can make it and they couldn't make it, and when do you kind of call in sick, or I don't know what. I have a real, the logistics seem very challenging. I think the purpose of committees is to do the work with the staff, to vet whatever proposal is in front of them, whatever project they're working on. I think that a lot of these projects have multiple moving parts, and that's why those discussions happen in a committee session, because if someone drops in and then drops out, the information may be taken out of context. And so to me, that's the importance of whomever is on each committee needs to be there for all the meetings. And their participation, their vetting, their preparation is so important, because so much of that work happens at the committee level. And to me, if I'm on a committee, I expect to be able to have done the work at the committee level, and when it then comes before council and there's discussion about it, that I'm confident in my ability to either defend it or question it or articulate how we've gotten there. So as you've said, I think that it's the importance of taking good notes and having a thorough report at each council meeting. I feel comfortable that if I hear a report, I'm happy to go. I feel comfortable going to whoever the department head is and asking further questions. Yes, I like the idea of a 20 or 30-minute presentation from various departments on a regular basis. I think the challenge is sometimes, again, there's too many moving parts, and it's not necessarily ready for public consumption or public ridicule. And that's just kind of that's doing business. So I am not comfortable at this time without further understanding and refinement to have those alternates included in this resolution.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young and then Mr. Walters.
I totally understand that, and I really just want to say I totally get that positioning. Again, I'm just simply asserting that although the heavy lift is done by the members of that particular committee, there's also 4 members of council that may want a deeper knowledge about how we got here. And sometimes that doesn't come from just reading the details of what's put in the packet. And sometimes I think that even in a department head coming before council, particularly those major departments, not that other departments aren't important, but the ones lots of money, I think that I'm not asking that they come and present things that's half-baked, or even things that they can't talk about right now because it may affect the outcome of where we're going. What I'm asking is that the overview of almost the SWOT analysis of where they are, the challenges that may come before council, the hopes that they have, such that the other 4 members that are not part of that committee feel even more updated and abreast at a limited level, I guess. But it's just allowing us more, if we choose to delve deeper. And that, I think, is crucial, given each of us have 1 vote.
Just before Mr. Walters goes, I just want to answer that, yes, there is plans for a council retreat, so that's in work, and I hear loud and clear about the updates from staff, but again, always a challenge to communicate the information, but once we're in this forum, we can talk about anything we want. Sorry, Mr. Walters.
Yeah, I want to again echo the concerns about the alternates, but also I think Mr. Young's point about communication generally is worth taking to heart. When I joined council, we didn't have reports from committees, so they were really black boxes. And they were very much just a one-way I mean, it was a download of stuff that the department wanted you to hear about. Maybe not anything that they didn't want you to hear about. And then it wasn't relayed to the rest of council. I don't think that we really do a great job at relaying all that information that should come from the departments. And if you watch other council meetings in other jurisdictions, I mean, they are just getting briefings from department heads. I mean, as a matter of course, the department head comes and tells you what's going on in the department. And it's important for council members who are charged with making policy in all these different areas to have a really good sense of what the city's doing, just generally, but also about big policy issues that are coming forward so that we can provide feedback. And if necessary, maybe we, as part of the retreat, could have maybe a more in-depth conversation about what we expect committees to do. Because I think it's really valuable for committees to provide feedback to the department. So if a department says, hey, we got this thing that we're going to bring to you, we can say, well, that rings a red flag with us. You ought to plan for public comment on that. You don't have to, that's just our recommendation, but it is the heads up from the elected official, and it would really benefit staff to have that heads up. If it's just a one-way communication, I don't think we're doing our, and I don't need to go to those committee meetings either, because, you know, they should just come to us and tell us here, all 7 of us and the public, what's going on. So, just to move this forward, I think we have a much larger conversation here to have about how to make these things operate better. I would like us to just approve the resolution, maybe deleting the alternates from the standing committees, leaving them for the other ones because there's no OPMA issue with the committees that don't have 3 council members anyway, and then let's like get something scheduled to talk about that. If that's the retreat, then great. But we could have the discussion here too.
And I think there was another, Mr. Hoagland, did you have another, there was something that you found on the resolution?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Merritt. Just if I may suggest a slight edit to the purpose of the Finance Committee. I did exchange emails with Mr. Young about this, but the second part of the purpose is what I wanted to replace. So it would read, to make recommendations on the municipal budget, capital facilities financing, and other financing transactions, policies, and status.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Yeah, again, 10 years ago, we were reviewing every single transaction every week. It was a lot of fun with Mr. Hoagland and his staff. But we've since done away with that in favor of just putting it in the packet and having the entire council and the public being able to see it and review it every week. So I think that language is broad enough. I would move that we adopt Resolution 3070 as presented, but with the deletion of the alternates from the standing committees section.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion from Mr. Walters and a second from Ms. Moulton to approve Resolution 3070, appointment of council members to committees with the deletion of the alternates. And I think you're okay with the correction of Mr. Hoagland? Just from the standing committee section, the deletion of alternates from the standing committees. Ms. Hunt, do you take the vote?
Excuse me, Mayor. Mr. Walters, your motion did include the wording change suggested by Mr. Hoagland. Okay, and Ms.
Yeah,
Moulton,
I
you
might not have
seconded
said that, but that's what I meant.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. All right, call for the vote, please.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much for that great discussion and definitely good discussion for the retreat. More to follow on that. Okay, item 4C, committee reports, and they will be awesome committee reports, I'm certain. Who's got this one?
Personnel, right?
Yes, personnel.
Sure.
Ms. Cleland.
Thanks. So Mr. McDougall and I participated in the Personnel Committee. It was on January 4th. We were hoping to have a little bit more preparation or work done, but we ended up with a pretty brief meeting. Quick update that our various bargaining units are working well with the city. They're hammering out the details, so we should have fire, police, commissioned and non-commissioned, and then Teamsters coming to you sooner than later. A couple of them probably a lot sooner, but that's going well. They've worked a little bit on the non-represented salary schedules just to get them a little bit further along and aligned with the market. There was a little discussion about COVID and how we were handling that. Our policy right now is just to follow CDC guidelines and keep it simple. So whatever goes there, that's what we will do. And then finally, we've had a lot of open positions, so our HR department is very busy doing recruitment, and there's a number of positions in public works, one in museum, one in planning, and one in fire. So we're glad to get those starting to be filled. I think that's about it.
All right, thank you. Planning Committee,
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The Planning Committee met at 5 p.m. today. Mr. Walters, Ms. Cleland McGrath, Mr. Miesmer, and I, and also Ms. Grage was there because the updated Shoreline Master Program will be presented to the Planning Commission on January 26th. There have been a few changes to the draft required by ecology, and because those were not part of the original draft, there will be a public comment period on those. So that's upcoming, and that should come to council in March. We talked about the Wilson Hotel and a loan that the city provided to them years ago for the Wilson Hotel, which they have been paying. It has cost the city quite a bit to administer the loan and in reporting requirements, and we're talking about forgiving the loan to the Anacortes Housing Authority, who manages the Wilson Hotel. The remaining amount is $160,000, and we feel that as a committee that we are bringing it forward. We think it's a good idea, and it's a benefit to the community and our citizens. And also, we've given quite a lot of funding to the Family Center, and we're trying to be fair, and this helps. And you'll see in our presentation of the HACS committee tonight some figures on the population served, the individuals and the families, and where we are with that. And I think you'll be pleased. We also talked about the fully contained communities that the county has docketed, and you may have read about it in the paper, but there are some process questions that cities in our county feel that have not been followed by the county. So there is going to be a meeting of the Growth Management Steering Committee this Thursday, and we'll have more information from Mr. Miesmer after that. He and some of the other city planners will be involved in that, and there will be discussions with the county and the steering committee about how that is proposed to move forward. But that's something that we'll be following closely. And we will see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other committee reports that I might have missed? All right, we're on to item 5, public comment. This is the time for the public to comment on any item that is not on the agenda. I had Heather Thomas sign up, but I think she departed. And anybody online attending through our Zoom meeting, please raise your hand, and I'll try to figure out how to get it through.
Mayor, I just wanted to make one comment. We are experiencing some technical difficulties. So for those watching at home, the podium camera is not connecting properly. It should not impact the presentations themselves, just the podium view for this evening. And we are working on it behind the scenes, so hopefully we'll be back up and running shortly.
Okay, thank you for that tech update. Okay, I'm going to move on to our consent agenda. Item 6, Council.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Young.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion for Mr. Young and a second for Mr. Carter to approve consent agenda items A through E. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it turns out I misspoke during my planning committee report. So the city did not loan the Anacortes Housing Authority the money. It was a grant from the Department of Health and Urban Development. It was a CDBG grant from the federal government. So it was
Gotcha.
not our money that we're like.
No, thank
Yeah.
you for that clarification. I appreciate.
And thank you, Joanne Stewart, for just emailing me that.
for staving off the emails and the comments. Appreciate it. Okay, on to item 7, public hearings. Our first public hearing is on ordinance 4004, ordinance amending AMC Chapter 3.93 impact fees to specify fees, assessment limitations, and add fee exemptions for early learning facilities. I'm thinking Mr. Meismer. Is that you? Or Ms. Grage?
Mr. Mayor.
Oh,
That will be,
hi, Ms. Grage.
that will be Ms. Grage, Mr. Mayor.
All right,
Thank you.
you're on.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of the council and members of the audience. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, so it'll be just a moment. Okay. Are you all seeing my slide presentation and presentation view?
We got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so yes, I'm happy to be here this evening to present some information about draft ordinance 4004 relating to early learning facility impact fees. This evening's meeting was scheduled and advertised for a public hearing. Just an overview of the item tonight. In 2021, the Washington State Legislature passed Substitute House Bill 1331 concerning early learning impact fees, early learning facility impact fees. The bill amended RCW 820260 impact fees, and that is the statute that authorizes local governments to adopt and assess impact fees on new development. And staff are proposing amendments to the city's regulations regarding impact fees for consistency with the changes to the state law, and also to take advantage of a new authorization for impact fee exemptions for early learning facilities. So just a quick little refresher on what impact fees are. They are one-time charges that are assessed by a local government against a new development to help pay for new or expanded public facilities that are needed to serve that new growth. Fees can be collected for, collected fees can be used for projects that are identified in the city's 6-year capital facilities plan. And Anacortes has adopted impact fees in Chapter AMC, Anacortes Municipal Code 3.93. And we have adopted transportation, parks, and fire impact fees. Substitute House Bill 1331 defines an early learning facility as a facility providing regularly scheduled care for a group of children 1 month of age through 12 years of age for periods of less than 24 hours. And the bill prohibits the city from imposing impact fees on an early learning facility greater than what would be imposed on a commercial retail or office development of a similar scale. There's an optional provision in the bill that authorizes the city, if it desires, to exempt early learning facilities from 80% or 100% of impact fees without the city being required to pay them from public funds other than impact fee accounts. And the 100% exemption requires that the early learning facility meet certain conditions. Those conditions are that the facility or the property owner would need to record a covenant that runs with the property. The covenant needs to address or require that at least 25% of children and families that would use or attend the early learning facility qualify for state subsidized childcare. Another provision that needs to be in the covenant is that if the early learning facility does not achieve the required percentage at any point during the calendar year, then the owner is required to pay 20% of the impact fees within 90 days of being notified by the city, and any remaining balance becomes a lien on the property. And then finally, the covenant needs to identify that conversion to another use besides an early learning facility would require payment of those impact fees in effect at the time of conversion. So as I mentioned, staff is proposing some revisions to AMC 3.93 impact fees. The proposed revisions would add a new section 3.93060 that would include the limitations on assessment of impact fees for early learning facilities that I previously mentioned, and then proposed exemption to 100% of the impact fees, subject to recording a covenant. And there's also one small cleanup item that staff's proposing as part of this ordinance, and that's to strike a exemption to park impact fees for non-residential construction. City Council adopted new park impact fees, I think it was last year. And with that adoption, authorized collection of impact fees for non-residential construction. So that's a remnant that needs to be deleted. A couple of considerations for adopting the impact fee exemption for early learning facilities. Convenient access to quality, affordable childcare is a critical component of livable communities. And Anacortes, as we've learned over the last few years, has an inadequate supply to accommodate existing families. Some of the barriers to adding more facilities include permitting and zoning, and also costs associated with going through the review process. And so the impact fee exemption is one tool that's available to the city to be able to minimize fees for new essential learning facilities and facilitate their development in our community. This slide is showing just an example of impact fees that would be collected for a theoretical 4,500 square foot early learning facility with a capacity for about 30 children. So you can see the transportation, parks, and fire. And based on our rate schedule, the total and impact fees for that facility would be $23,302.48. So staff did explore the ability for the city to be able to waive general facilities charges for early learning facilities. And general facilities charges are the utility connection fees that are usually a pretty significant cost. Excuse me, state statute does allow cities to waive general facilities charges for low-income persons, as long as the waivers follow a program established by ordinance, and the city has adopted provisions for that. But based on discussions that staff reached out to MRSC and also the finance department, and there doesn't appear to be any specific statutory authority for the city to offer an exemption to GFCs for an early learning facility. And so at this time, staff's not proposing that in this ordinance. Just wrapping up. So the process to date on this ordinance, the City Council Planning Committee reviewed the draft language in December 2021. And then this evening, we'll have a public hearing. And then staff would propose City Council consideration and possible adoption later in January 2022. And that's all I have for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. I think before I turn it over to council for questions, I want to make sure, since this is a public hearing, if any members of the public wish to comment on this item, either here in the room or online. I see two online. Okay, hearing nothing, council, questions for Ms. Grange?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
No, I guess I just wanted to reinforce the reason this came forward in so many ways is just simply because of the shortage and the need is so great. And what we're really trying to do is figure out how we can help that need and help our community at the same time. So I think this is something that we've talked about a long time. I think it's a great effort putting forward, and I think it creates an opportunity for our city to meet a great need.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll go ahead and leave the public hearing open because I don't think it hurts to leave it open, and then this will come back before council, and I'll close the public hearing before we take final action on this item. Okay, we're on to item 7B, Ordinance 4008, interim ordinance to extend Ordinance 3091, interim ordinance to facilitate the development of daycare to facilities R4 use zone. Ms. Grange, probably you again? Go for it.
Mayor Miller, actually, that's
of
me.
course. You know, can be right maybe once, not this time. Go ahead, Mr. Meismer.
Thank you, Mayor Miller, members of the council and the audience. As the mayor mentioned, Ordinance 4008 would extend Ordinance 3091 related to daycare to facilities in the R4 use zone as a permitted use. It's currently a conditional use and therefore requires a significant amount of work and expense to go through that conditional use permit process. So the ordinance would extend the current allowance as a permitted use for an additional 6 months to allow city staff to work with the community to determine possible impacts of daycare to facilities in the R4 use zone and potential mitigation measures. So what this does then is it continues that permitted use and would allow the construction and use of daycare to facilities throughout the R4 use zone. The city staff will return to city council to hold a public hearing on a resolution revising the work plan and to confirm the ordinance within 60 days. With that, I know it's rather quick and straightforward. City staff recommends approval of Ordinance 4008, and the recommendation for approval of 4008 stems specifically from Ordinance 3091 expiring in January 12th of this month, January 12th.
Okay, and once again, this is a public hearing, so I'd invite members of the public if they have any comments on this item. And online, in person. Okay, no comment on that one. I think we've already discussed this one, so I think I can close the public hearing on this one and turn it over to council. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. I think we've had this before. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on item 7B and over to council for action discussion.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Thank you. Mr. Meismer, can you remind me, has any organization or, set of individual taken advantage of the interim ordinance to date? Have we had any proposals come through?
Thank you, Mr. McDougall. Yes, Anacortes Family Center has come through with a proposal for early learning facility on the ground floor of their new building.
Fantastic. And how many kids, what's the size of that one, do you recall?
My recollection is about 40.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Good to hear. Thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
I'd like to thank Mr. Meismer for his work on this and helping to move this forward for a need that we all know is a desperate one in our community. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I would like to move to approve Ordinance 4008.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Moulton, a second from Mr. McDougall to approve Ordinance 4008. Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we're on to item 8, other business. First up is 8A, Anacortes Fiber Internet Update. Ms. Shu, I believe.
Hey, Mayor, Council, members of the audience, let me go ahead and bring up my presentation. Excuse me. Sorry, I have a little bit of a frog in my throat. Okay, can everybody see that?
We got it. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm pleased tonight to present an update on Access Anacortes Fiber Internet. We have moved back to our second meeting of the month as our annual, or as our monthly update. So it's been just 3 weeks since I last presented. With that, I'm still pleased that today was a very exciting day in the fiber department. We surpassed 1,000 customers today. As you are aware, in December, we had multiple days with snow that have impacted our ability to be out in the field, but we were able to help with the Public Works Department with some things that were going on to help them with the snow and ice and sanitation. So as of today, we have 1,002 customers. And you can see that we, from January to, well, I guess I removed the January of 21, but we have over 500 new customers this year. Our monthly revenue has increased to $65,386.25 a month. So we have a nice upward trend there. Excuse me. This is another way to look at our customer orders. But I would like to point out in the West End, where we are currently under construction, that we have a 31.8% take rate with 732 customers out of the potential 2,302 premises that will be passing. Currently, 81 customers are in service, and that is increasing on a daily basis. Excuse me. In regard to looking at our cash flows, this is looking from January 1 through December 31st. So you do have a full year's look here. In December, the remaining balance from the line of credit was applied to our account. So the total amount for the line of credit in 2021 was $4,500,298. And our total cash flow was a $656,790 deficit in the red. We are expecting to see that in the mid-2022 that our operating cash flows will balance with our operating expenses, not necessarily for our construction expenses, but for our day-to-day operating expenses will be meeting. In the West End, construction continues. We do have full installations underway. The contractor is about 58% of the way through all of the trenching and vault placement work in that area. We continue to secure easements on private streets. And as I mentioned previously, we have 732 orders in that area. This is a small section where you can, I know it's probably a little bit light to see, but All the areas in green are the areas that the construction is complete and we're doing full installations in. And we're updating this on a monthly basis and including that on our website as well. As we continue to talk about our network expansion, the work will continue in the West End, where we are passing 2,375 premises. And the funding source for that continues to be the line of credit that we talked about previously and funding through the American Recovery Plan Act. This year, we are moving forward with the Guaymas View, which is the area between Anna Coppermine Road and A Avenue. The first draft of that design is complete, and we expect that construction and installation will occur in 2022. Right now, that is being paid for through debt funding. In regard to the EDA area, which is the east of A Avenue and backfilling our current service areas, that design work is complete. And we expect in 2022 that the bid for materials and construction will move forward. This is all being done in a little bit different manner than the other projects that we've been working on, because we do have a federal grant to help offset some of those costs. That does require us to meet all of the federal requirements for the contracting. And unlike some of our other projects where we've been able to procure the materials in advance and then enter into a separate contract with the contractor, that all needs to happen all at one time. As I've discussed previously in previous sessions, there is quite a delay in the procurement of materials, sometimes up to a year. If I were to order something today, it might be a year from now, then it would be delivered. So that's what's causing some of the delay in that area. But please rest assured that we are continuing moving forward with doing everything to get that area into service. We're just doing it within the confines of working through some federal funding to help offset that cost. And this map is a new map that we are including on our website. All the areas in green are where the current service is available. That includes out in the West End where we've highlighted the particular streets. And we are updating this on a monthly basis, so you'll be able to see the new areas as the West End, that whole area turns to green as the construction continues in that area. And I think that we've talked about the different funding sources for each of these project areas that are the West End, which is under construction, the Guaymas View, which will be under construction, and the EDA that we're continuing to work to get under construction. So these are the areas to help us be able to move forward with fulfilling the goal of passing every premise within the city of Anacortes. Some special projects that we're working on. Dakota Creek has added some additional dark fiber leases. We'll have them in service by early February. Swinomish Links has asked for a business class internet. We'll put them in service in the first quarter of 2022. As the West End work continues, Western Washington University at their Shannon Point Marine Center is interested in dedicated internet access. And we also will be adding an additional site for Island Hospital with a dark fiber lease in early 2022. So we do have some other side projects that are going on as we continue to try and partner with the business community in the Anacortes. I always like to put a plug in that the city has its own Anacortes fiber internet. This is completely owned and operated by the city. And we are here to help serve you by providing high-speed internet service to meet both your business and your residential needs. So we can't wait for you to give us a call, sign up for service, and see how quickly we can get you into service to meet those business and residential needs. We do have continuing activity that's underway. We're continuing to work to meet all the federal contracting requirements with the EDA grant. We've been teaming with the legal department and appreciate their support as we're obtaining easements with both the West End and the EDA homeowners associations and property owners. We've been working on our legislative priorities, and we'll bring them back as all of the city's legislative priorities next week, and continuing conversations with the legislators regarding some challenges that we're having in accessing grant funding appropriated through the Washington State Broadband Office. In the last 3 weeks, we've had 2 separate meetings with Congressman Larson's office discussing broadband needs. And we're also teaming with the finance department to address financial needs and funding as we're moving forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Ms. Shu. Any member of the public wish to address this topic? Looking in-house, looking online. Council, questions, comments?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Thanks. Ms. Shu, could we go back to the market share take rate slide? I just wanted to, it went fast, I think. And I just wanted to see
sorry about that.
the total
Yes.
numbers. All good. I know that West End number, the 31.8%, that's really good considering we've just started installations, so that's fantastic. I see the rest of Guaymas View and East Side were well over 20%, so in the city, the entire city, we're close to, well, we're just over 31%, so that's great.
And in the areas where we are currently in service, and this is including the West End, we have a 38.3% market share. So that is very positive in terms of as we've been preparing our business plan and looking at the numbers and the percentage of the market that we needed to make this a successful venture. So very, very pleased with those numbers.
Mayor Miller.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Young.
Ms. Shu, thank you for a wonderful presentation. As always, it's a delight to see the numbers changing, the progress that's being made in the community toward access. At some point, I'd like to hear if there are any updates on, I remember we were looking toward a grant that we may be able to get as a city. However, if there were some objections from some other facility or some other, I guess, entity, that it put us in a different category if we were allowed to get that grant or not. But I just wanted at some point an update on how we were doing to try to get those additional dollars.
I'm happy to actually address that right now. The Access Anacortes Fiber Internet Department has been very proactive in seeking out grant opportunities. All of the federal funding that is coming forth for broadband funding is currently being allocated through the Washington State Broadband Office. So it goes from the federal government to the state government or the state broadband office. One part of the RCWs at the state level that is creating a bit of a hiccup for the city is that written into the state RCW is the requirement that anytime there's an incumbent in the area, that you have to let them know that you are looking at a project and seeking federal or funding through the Washington State Broadband Office. They then have the ability to challenge that application. And we have had that happen to us where a project has been challenged. If the incumbent can show that they are providing service in that area. I do appreciate the help that the council fiber committee members have really leaned in. And as we're looking forward to our legislative priorities, we're looking at giving some ideas for some creative ways that may be looked at a little bit differently. For example, Councilmember McDougall has brought forth the idea that perhaps there would be an ability that if there was just a monopoly environment, that would potentially be that requirement that the incumbent could challenge it may be a bit changed, because there is some value, and we see the value in having some competition in the market, both from ability to increase the service and potentially impact the pricing structure. So that is one thing that we're talking about. And we're having these conversations both at a state and a federal level. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Shu? So at the beginning of the meeting, I pulled off, since it's related to fiber, item 8B. I'm sure you all saw it in the packet. I just felt like we didn't have enough really good answers for you all for the contract modification, and want to, and it's not going to slow anything down that we have going on, but really wanted to touch base with the contractor, see exactly what's going on there, because it's going to affect our future progress and fiber. So we want to make sure we really have a good idea of what we're talking about as far as dollars. So you'll see that next week. And again, feel free to shoot me a note if you got any further questions on that. All right, on to item 8C, contract award, fire ladder truck. I think I'll get this one right. Chief Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, and guests. First of all, I'd like to express our thanks and gratitude to the finance department and the legal department for helping get this contract ready for council on time. They've been a great help assisting with the contract process. Council, you have before you today the proposed contract award to replace the fire department's aging ladder truck. The ladder truck that we currently have was not included in the fleet's ER&R replacement fund. Therefore, this has been identified in the 2022 approved budget as a line item purchase. The purchase will be issued under an HGAC buy contract, which meets the purchasing requirements for both the city of Anacortes and the state of Washington. As presented in previous work sessions, we are taking advantage of multiple discounts and able to place our order prior to a significant industry price increase. The contractor has given us in writing until January 14th of this month to get the signed contract to them. We are still able to take the discounts for the chassis progress payment and the discount for the aerial device progress payment. One that we decided not to take advantage of was the 100% prepayment discount. A couple reasons for that is due to the great number of orders that are flooding the contractor due to the anticipated price increase. The lead time has now been extended out to 16 to 20 months to actually build the apparatus. Also included in that is some supply chain issues, which I think industry-wide everybody's seeing. It does not really benefit the city to take that 100% prepayment discount because we can actually earn more on interest on those funds rather than giving it to them 16 to 20 months ahead of time. So as I previously stated, the current pricing is being held until January 14th, after which the expected increase will be experienced, and we don't know exactly what that would be yet, but we do know it's going to be double digits. At this point, staff is recommending council to authorize the mayor to sign the contract award to Hughes Fire Equipment in the amount of $1,622,009.98. Does anybody have any questions that I could answer for him tonight?
Council, questions for
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Walters?
Mr. Kennedy, could you tell us a little bit about the fancy features of the fire truck?
Sure. This is a 100-foot aerial fire truck. It is pretty close to the same height we have now. It's actually 4 feet lower in height than what we currently have. One advantage that this truck would have is it has a bucket which helps get staff to the rescue site faster. Once we get on scene, the setup time is approximately 45 to 60 seconds, where our current ladder truck takes usually about 4 to 5 minutes. With the staffing that we currently use, which could be as little as 3 people on an apparatus, this makes a huge difference in actual rescue time, and also in getting a aerial master stream set up. It is also just as quick as it would be for a rescue scenario. The storage on the ladder truck is about the same as what we have on our current truck for space, so we will be able to take a lot of the existing equipment that we have on our current ladder truck and move it over to the new ladder truck. It will still be able to respond with 4 people on it should we ever have the additional staff present. And that's pretty much the difference.
Thank you. I think just as a general matter, we're getting much more of a ladder truck than what we currently have. We're not just replacing a ladder truck that is failing and past its useful life, but we're getting a much more advanced ladder truck that is going to benefit the city quite a bit.
That is true. The technologies over the last 20 years have increased at an incredible rate in what we're able to do electronically and remotely, which helps perform with less staff.
All right, yeah, the only sad news, if council votes to approve this, we can't go down and pick up the keys and, drive it in, so we have to be kind of patient, like really patient, but that's okay.
Yeah, we're looking at a 16 to 20 month lead time, unfortunately.
Okay, council?
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Young?
I move that City Council authorize the mayor to sign contract 22-031-AFD-001 with Hughes Fire Equipment, Inc. in the amount of $1,622,009.98 for the purchase of a ladder truck for the fire department.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Young, second by Ms. Hubick for the purchase of a fire ladder truck. Ms. Hunt?
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you, and thanks, Chief Kennedy. And
Thank you.
we're on to our next vehicle potential purchase, item 8D. All right. I think Mr. Buckmeyer, yeah, he's here. Okay. We're going to talk about a contract award for a Vector sewer truck purchase potential.
Thank you, Mayor
You're
and
on.
Council. I had a great PowerPoint presentation all prepared for you tonight, but there's glitches in here, so if I could hold it up or whatever. But anyway, sorry.
You're gonna just describe describe how wonderful this truck will serve the citizens of Anacortes. All right.
All right. So yes, staff is seeking city council consent to issue a purchase order in the amount of $497,923.05 to Owen Equipment Company for the purchase of a Vector sewer truck. So how this works is we're proposing to buy this off of something called the Washington State Procurement Contract. There is a 6% price increase coming at us on January 24th. So tonight would be a really good night to if you're so inclined to do this, to approve this. It'd be a great night to do it. Currently, we have 2 Vector trucks. We have a 2017 truck, and we have a 2002 older truck. This is the big one that you see driving around town. It's got the big tank and the big hose. Okay, good. All right. So the proposal is to buy this 2022 truck. That would become our primary piece of equipment. The 2017 Vector truck would become our backup, and we would surplus the 2002 truck and sell it on the market. So the impact to the equipment replacement reserve fund is probably one of the questions that I would ask if I was city council. So the 2022's the new vehicle coming on board is going to start its own standard replacement fund, and it'll grow as the vehicle gets older. The 2017 vehicle has a partial ER&R balance. It's not quite fully funded there. Mr. Hoagland and I were just looking at it. We think it's around $460,000, so not quite enough to buy a new one, but pretty darn close. So what we would do would be to sell the 2002 vehicle, use the proceeds from that to supplement the new ENR, the one for the 2017. So the 2017 truck would be fully ER&R funded, replacement funded, and the 2022 would start its own replacement fund. Wish I had my PowerPoint. Yeah, with that, they're about a 12-year life cycle on these vehicles, so that's coming up pretty quick on the 2017. I'm going to stop talking and hope to answer questions.
All right, council questions for Mr. Buckmeyer. All right, and the open market value, we think the good used car value on our old truck.
Yeah, I asked that question, and Mr. Ludeman was not going to hazard a guess. It's probably more than we think it is because of there's a used market value, higher value than normal out there. So yeah. Good time to sell it.
We won't make you promise a number, but we think there's some good value there.
Yeah, thank you.
Council, any other questions, comments? Action? Mr. Walters?
Maybe it was the absence of the PowerPoint, but I just admit to not quite following how we're paying for this. Do you have any shells that you can move around to illustrate?
So
just how are we?
No shell game. The money is going to come out of the sewer fund.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right. The truck is also used for storm service. We're not going to use any of that.
Correct. Yeah. The storm utility is a little hurting right now, so we were thinking of not impacting it anymore for this.
Okay.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
I move that City Council authorize the mayor to sign purchase order 22038 ERR001 with Owen Equipment Company in the amount of $497,923.05 for the purchase of a Vector sewer truck.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. Carter for the purchase of a Vector sewer truck. Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote, please?
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to item 8E, the item everyone's been waiting for. Looking forward to this one. Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee Report on Unmet Community Service Needs. So I think somebody from HASC has the lead on that. Mr. Walters, perhaps?
That's right, Mayor Miller. Give me a second here. I'll share my screen since our voice from the heavens earlier told us the podium is not working. All right, how are we doing? Everybody see that there?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. So we have about 20 slides. We'd like to take questions during the presentation. If they seem quick, we'll answer them. If not, we'll try to circle back at the end. As you all might recall, Ordinance 3078, which was our budget for the 2020 budget year, included this proviso directing our committee, the Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee, to do some analysis of our social services needs of city residents. Some of us were seemingly more aware of more obvious mental illness on our streets, of more homelessness visible in Anacortes, especially on our streets, which seemed to indicate the importance of trying to get ahead of some of these issues as soon as possible. And we were more aware of social services gaps in Anacortes than we were previously. So we launched this effort as directed by council, and clearly we did not meet the June 30th, 2021 deadline, but we also determined it's a much bigger job than we thought. This presentation is not intended to pretend to be extraordinarily comprehensive. We could very clearly spend another 6 months on this work. But we also stepped up. We adjusted from our 2 meetings a month to every week to try to achieve some of this deadline. We want to first present some background, some new numbers that quantify the seriousness of the problems that we face, even here in beautiful Anacortes. So first of all, we have data from the point-in-time count, which is well known as the sort of the gold standard for measuring how many people are homeless. And that count is done on a countywide level, and the results are funneled over to the Department of Commerce. And we have 314 homeless people in Skagit County per the point-in-time count. But there's also been, over time, a recognition that the point-in-time count is pretty limited in what it can actually count. So the Department of Commerce has developed some other methodologies, including looking at people that have requested services and surveys separate from the point-in-time count. And so that methodology yields the number 941 homeless people in Skagit County. But then they go a step further, and I have another metric as well that measures, also looking through who's contacting service providers, homeless and unstably housed people, kids that are couch surfing, or people that are not homeless today, but were homeless last week and may very well be homeless next week. That number is 2,300 in Skagit County. And remembering that all of these are for the county, and we don't really have very good data on what those numbers look like for Anacortes. But we do know from the Anacortes School District, which is again, somewhat larger than the city itself, that we have 46 kids enrolled in Anacortes School District that are homeless. If you look at the Family Center provides housing. The Family Center also provides other services to a whole lot of Anacortes residents. And we've got this PowerPoint. It will be added to the packet, and we don't need to go over all of these very individual numbers, but you'll be able to find it on the web. And basically, the bottom line number here of 511 is how many people the Family Center helped in 2021. And you can see on the right, there's a success rate for their emergency shelter and transitional shelter services, but then they've also got an affordable housing service, which is not necessarily meant to have a success from. It's to provide housing that is more affordable than the market would provide to people that are in that income range that you see there, which is 30 to 60% of the area median income. And that number, the area median income, which is provided by HUD, is $83,000, and 60% of that is $49,000, and then it can be adjusted for household size. So that's what the Family Center is providing. We've also got tremendous service from the Housing Authority here in Anacortes, which is separate from the city. It's got Anacortes Housing in the name, but it's not a city entity. And this is a list of their facilities, how many units they have, and how many residents they are currently serving. I think, again, as of 2021, The bottom line number there is 346. And we put together this chart because we do think it's important to have these numbers and have them all in one place where we can refer to them and keep track of how these services are made available and who's eligible. We don't need to go into it all, but another important statistics here, you see at the bottom, is that we have 211 people on the Anacortes Housing Authority waiting list, and 177 of those on the waiting list are for studio and one-bedroom units. And then there's statistics for the other sized units as well, but that particular number I think is pretty important. Both of these entities give a preference for local applicants, and so the fact that you've got this waiting list and the facilities are all full really leads us to a basic conclusion that we are serving a lot of Anacortes people. So what we did over the past year is we held listening sessions with interested community members. We circulated a questionnaire to 149 people and organizations. We were really trying to get at service providers who are working with people every day. So it's not simply anecdotes from members of the public, although we also solicited participation from members of the public. We hosted a meeting of those service providers, and there were about 50 representatives who attended. And it was a good meeting where we were able to try to draw out more information from them, of things that we hadn't thought of, that we hadn't put on our questionnaire. And then we met weekly for more than 14 weeks with service provider participation, and then we slowed down a little bit towards the end of the year. And then we met with other expert resources. We worked with a homelessness consultant. We met with county and state officials, and for posterity, we have some slides that lay out who those people were. But just as an example, we met with a couple of homeless people, including First Step resident, that new facility over in Burlington. We met with the social worker in Mount Vernon PD because some discussions about inserting a social worker into Anacortes PD was what spurred this effort to really dig into what we need here in Anacortes, and all the other people that you see here on the list. These are some of the names of the people that routinely attended our meetings. We published on the website the link to the Zoom, and a lot of people called in. We especially want to note the participation of Don Miesmer and Joanne Stewart from the Planning Department, who really were our primary staff liaisons, and also Police Chief Floyd, who attended almost every meeting. From all of this data that we accumulated, we identified really a top 5 list of categories of need. And number 1 is housing, which I think obviously we've been focused on to a great extent from much before when we started this process. But it does come back to housing for a lot of these different issues. Behavioral and to another extent physical health is another big category of what people are needing and seeking here in our community in terms of services. Childcare and to another extent adult daycare is also critical, and we had people come out of the woodwork to tell us that we need help with adult daycare, and we saw a loss of adult daycare during the pandemic. To a somewhat lesser extent, legal aid, tenant aid, aid with criminal situations, and especially domestic violence. And then sort of a catch-all vulnerable populations category of need for seniors, for disabled people, for developmentally disabled people, for veterans. Specifically on this last one, we heard more than a few people say that we have an impending cliff of developmentally disabled people who currently live with their parents, who won't be able to live with their parents forever. And those people are community members. We want to keep them as members of our community, but there's going to be a lot of them potentially over the next decade, and we don't really have services available to take care of that need. So the upshot here is there is a lot of need in our community. Some of it's quantifiable, not a lot of it, or a lot of it isn't quantifiable, and there's much more work to do if we want to spend time quantifying it. What we thought would be useful is to put these problems that we kept encountering into a couple of different buckets so that we could just get our arms around them, really. So we identified 3 problem buckets. First, communication and coordination. We do have a lot of services out there. They're all in their own little silos. they may or may not be communicating with each other, but also people who need those services may not be aware of those services. They may not be able to connect with the service providers. So we see a communication and coordination piece that is pretty important, just as an overall need. Housing, of course, although we're already working on it as a community and as a city, we've got some additional ideas, and we have spent time on that. And then behavioral health. So taking the first one, communication and coordination between the agencies needs improvement. Human services generally are very fragmented. You've got the family center, you've got the housing authority. They do not serve the same populations. You've got all these other agencies and nonprofits, and they're doing a lot of good work. We don't have a central place for you to go to get all of the services you might be eligible for. Not everyone may know that you're eligible for those services. We don't perceive of any central communication hub for those providers. And this is important because we have our own staff doing some of this work. The police department obviously is encountering people on a regular basis, the fire department as well, but Parks and Rec, library staff, they're encountering people in need. They are not themselves service providers. We don't want them to become service providers, but we need to get them the ability to connect people to where they can go get those services. Even the finance department might have a role to play, and I see Mr. Hoagland escaped our attention, but the finance department offers a utility discount program. But if people don't know about it, or if they can't connect to it, then we'll have a similar issue of being able to facilitate that communication and coordination. Some interim steps that we've taken, the weekly meetings themselves, we feel like have facilitated some interagency communication. And we rescheduled these meetings to be early morning during the day so that agencies who are working during the day can attend. We learned about this app. It's basically a website that's called Unite Us, that is promoted and funded by healthcare agencies nationwide, and it's being rolled out county by county in Washington State as a platform for service providers to take in clients, do intake, and refer them to other service providers. We are very not sure that that is going to really work for us. It's a free service, so there's not a lot wagered, but it's something that we have started exploring. We got the city signed up so that we could get in there and look around. And then, of course, the city contracted with the Family Center to provide support to APD, so a social worker to be able to interact with people where necessary, where APD perceives that they need help. I think our goals overall here are to ensure that people in need are referred to existing services that can help them, but also to help people before their needs become acute. Helping people before they become homeless is much cheaper for the city and obviously much better for the person. So one stat that we found indicates that a chronically homeless person costs taxpayers $36,000 a year on average. So that might be something really worth paying attention to. In terms of housing, some of the needs that we identified just broadly, some of our broad goals is availability of housing affordable to all income levels, and especially studio, one-bedroom, SRO units, both market rate and low income. We've got that need across the board. Emergency shelter is not really something that's available for all groups here in Anacortes. Cold weather shelter has some appeal and it has some virtue, but by itself it's just for the cold weather. It doesn't really help move the ball forward to get people into permanent housing. Low barrier shelter, for instance, First Steps, we think that center over in Burlington has a lot of virtue. It's still getting off the ground, so we don't know exactly how it's going to work out, and also how it's going to work out for Anacortes residents, but it's something that we've looked at, and we've talked to one of the residents there. Rental assistance vouchers are not widely accepted because there's no capacity for use of the rental assistance vouchers. And of course, one of the big problems that we have here is we have a near zero vacancy anyway, so it's difficult even if you could afford housing to get into that housing. We do have problems with people that are in need going to, say, the library, where they can get some service from the library staff, but that's not really the place they need to go to get that full range of services. And so one possibility for addressing that is some kind of day room. Obviously, entities like the city and like the port have had to close some bathroom facilities because that hasn't worked out real well, but the need is still there. So those are things that we need to explore. And then as an interim measure, we did get the planning department clued into this housing action plan grant from the Department of Commerce. They're giving us money. We're developing this detailed plan as a result, which we signed the contract for tonight. That will help us really target with some strategies the goals and policies of our comprehensive plan that we've already adopted. There is a new mobile shower trailer that the county has on offer, and we may be able to make use of that. Obviously, we got to think about location options and really how it fits into a complete program. We don't just want to start offering showers by themselves. These are all important because there are new requirements in the Growth Management Act for our comprehensive plan to include a housing element that makes provisions for low, very low, extremely low, and moderate income households. We have specific requirements now that will become active in our next comprehensive plan update to achieve some of these things. So we will need to pay attention to that, and part of the housing action plan will be driving us towards those requirements. I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about what we're already doing and what we've done over the past several years. Obviously, the new comp plan and development regulations, facilitating townhouses, multifamily, cottage standards for cottage housing development, the bonus height provision, which has had some benefit. It's also been controversial. We'll work through a process later this year to reform that. Our impact and connection fee waiver program. Not everybody on our initial call was aware that we, had that program for low-income housing. Our Yes for Housing sales tax measure to fund income-based rental housing. We really are doing quite a lot in this area, which is not to say we're doing enough, but we're doing a lot, and we want to make sure that that's communicated to funders, grantors, and others. A housing consortium has sprung up countywide, and we as individual council members have participated in that. The focus, I think, of that group is to talk to the individual cities and the county about how they are all going to spend their affordable housing sales tax, because after we adopted our affordable housing sales tax by vote of the people, they each adopted theirs councilmanically. And then we have ongoing conversations with Skagit Habitat for Humanity about using potentially using vacant city-owned parcels for development of some single-family but lower incomes housing. And these systems provisions are working. These are some stats. In 2020 and in 2021, these are the market rate housing numbers that we've developed. And then on the far right, the number of low-income housing units that we've permitted. So in last year, 40 units of bona fide low-income housing it will be tracked. It receives the benefit of our low-income housing code because it's got that low-income covenant on it. So it's real numbers and it's real additions to our housing stock. Those sales tax assisted projects that the people voted for, the Landing Apartments is the family center project. It's 21 units. They broke ground last summer or so. We've been recipient of a lot of assistance from the city. They'll also be doing a child care facility, as Mr. Miesmer mentioned. They expect completion in 2023. This later one down here at the bottom, the Birch Tree Village Townhomes, that's the Housing Authority's project. It's 5 townhouses. They broke ground at the end of 2021. They expect completion this year. And then the third project is the Olson Building Rehabilitation. It's also a Housing Authority project. The Housing Authority will start work on that after the townhouses. So that's housing. The third and final item is behavioral health. And behavioral health is sort of an evolution of some of the prior terms. It's a term for both mental health and substance use disorders. Those disorders often coexist. It's important to note for these issues, we see them on the street. They are interactive. You may start with a mental health condition. You may self-medicate, especially with illegal substances. That may make both of those conditions worse. You may start with a substance abuse problem. You may end up with a mental health problem as a result. But the severity also exists along a continuum in that some people may need temporary interventions and some people may need long-term care. And it's critically important to have continuity of care. We can't have random interruptions in care where you're not able to procure or take your meds. And we believe, as a general matter, not we as a city necessarily, we as a county, we as a region, we as a state are really failing in behavioral health care. There seem to be extraordinary gaps that are recognized by others. Washington State ranks 45 out of 50 states in mental health treatment. There's everywhere you look, there's bottlenecks in evaluation, there's bottlenecks in getting into treatment. There's a countywide gap in sufficient facilities and bed space. Just as an example, the county is building has built a new evaluation and treatment center at United General Hospital, but it has essentially the same number of beds as the facility it's replacing at the former Northern State Hospital site. And we know that we need more beds generally in mental health. There are almost no long-term treatment facilities. We talked to a person from Western State Hospital, which was a critical link in our continuum of care. But they have been closed, which is arguably a good idea, to non-forensic mental health care treatment, but that gap hasn't been filled. And the state made that decision to close the facility before having a replacement ready. County and regional behavioral health providers are at or beyond their capacities. There's a severe shortage of social workers. We have a process where you can commit people to mental health treatment, and then they can be ordered by a judge after a hearing to take their medication so that they can get better. But the follow-up work is done by social workers, and there aren't any to hire. And so we talked to the court commissioner in charge of those mental health hearings and did not get good reports on the future of their ability to actually do that work. And there's long wait times for assignment to case managers. The other big component here is that we in Anacortes have experienced extended response times for the DCRs, the designated crisis responders, who are designated by the county. They are the ones authorized to make the initial detention of a person who's experienced a mental health crisis, who's unable to provide for their essential human needs as a result of that grave disability caused by that mental health crisis, including people who are a danger to themselves or a danger to others. We've got to, and we've talked a lot to Chief Floyd about this, have access to the DCRs to do that initial detention. Recently, APD successfully navigated that process, but then hit the bottleneck of treatment availability, of bed space to actually help the person that they were able to get detained. The fire department, they recently added a community paramedic position. We see some virtues in that. We're not taking credit for that, but they came up with that on their own. But we expect to get a more full report from them about their integrated healthcare model, and we see a lot of virtues. And then the Djwalik Wellness Center out at March's Point has also developed an integrated care model. And they are providing locally here substance abuse disorder and mental health counseling. It doesn't fill that entire gap, but it's an important component. And they've also got medicated assisted therapies. Just a couple things that don't fit into the bucket: expanding childcare, streamlining that permit process, which we extended tonight, and waiving the impact fees, and if we can, the connection fees, will make a big difference, because that's also a big cost burden on people that are in trouble. So here are our next steps. With behavioral health, we are largely at a loss as to what it is we can really do as a city to make improvements. So we think that our best bet is to work with Skagit County to improve timely access to the designated crisis responders, work as well with the legislature to get more resources, because without that we won't be able, Skagit County won't be able to hire more DCRs. And also, there will be other things that we can do, maybe provide additional city staff training across the board for people to recognize when they are encountering a behavioral health problem or a problem with a person who has intellectual or developmental disabilities so that they're able to provide effective service. We think it's important that maybe all staff have that. Anybody who's interacting with the public could help play that role. In terms of housing, the Housing Action Plan is obviously going to be critical in moving forward with that. Some kind of service, a day room service for people that need help is pretty critical in order to get them back onto a path toward permanent housing. We don't know precisely what that looks like. And a lot of these housing responses may come out of the Housing Action Plan process. We definitely do see continued participation in the Housing Consortium as a good thing. We'll see where that goes. And then also continued support of the Family Center and the Housing Authority, who are our big service providers on these issues here. Exploration of that Habitat for Humanity partnership. And then work on cost burden issues, like the utility costs, like childcare. On communication and coordination, continue to explore that Unite Us app to see if that gets us to where we need to go. But if not, come up with something else to make sure that service providers are connected to each other. Those meetings that we have had and will continue to have are important. And then improving direct coordination with Skagit County on human services issues is really key because the county runs a lot of the money, a lot of the funding sources. And some of the cities are talking about exploration of a countywide governance model for those funding sources, but also for the approaches on issues, and we think that that's really important. And then finally, really we need to have staff at the city that are working on these issues in order to facilitate that coordination. We see other departments that really do not have their core mission as providing homelessness services being burdened. We would like to help unload responsibilities from parks, library, and to some extent also police and fire, and help coordinate those responses, but also engaging in the policy discussion at the right level with the county. Because we need to make sure that Anacortes is taken care of as well as the other parts of the county as the county moves forward with different programs. There are a lot of grant funds available out there. The Housing Action Plan one was one that we found and applied for and got. I mean, that was very quick, but it doesn't happen without somebody out there really looking and dedicated. Their mission needs to be to work for these issues. Our splintered efforts are in fact costly for us. So it is difficult to calculate how much time the library or the parks department or the street department or others are spending on these kinds of issues. But it is important for the people that are in need that we are able to help them out. It's also a measurable cost to the city to ignore this problem. So we strongly think we need to keep moving forward, but also be thinking in these terms that you see here on this slide as we talk about next year's budget, as we talk about what it is we're going to do with the Housing Action Plan, because there is a need that we ignore here in Anacortes at our peril. We want all of our streets to be clean, and we don't really want to see homeless people on Commercial Avenue or anywhere else. But we've got to have some of these measures in place in order to, including legally, and we can talk about that separately, deal with some of those issues. So thank you for your attention. I'm so pleased to have not been interrupted by any questions in the middle, but we'd take anything now. And Carolyn Moulton and Christine Cleveland McGrath might want to weigh in as well.
Well, nobody interrupted because it was such a great presentation, and it really did a fantastic job of summing up a lot of hard work, a lot of meetings, a lot of interactions to lay out a pretty clear plan. I think the good news is, we're working on a lot of this now, and thanks for pointing out the fact that yes, council did approve the that grant funding, and we'll put that into place to help answer some of the housing issues. So yeah, great presentation. Council or other HACS members want to comment? Oh, yes, it's open to the public, yes. Question, thank you for reminding me. This is open for public comment. Okay, seeing none here and online.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young and then Ms. Moulton.
Okay, I just really wanted to say how much I really appreciated the depth of this conversation we had. What you've really done in this, I think, extraordinarily wonderful presentation is you've identified what's happening, what the needs are, where they are, how much continuity there is among services, and showed us that there's a huge hole. And really what it did in a big way was I feel like I'm informed. I feel like the work that's being done not only by the HACS, committee, but in working and reaching out to other services and agencies within the county has been extraordinary. The amount of knowledge and depth and the recognition of possibly what could be done and really sometimes what can't. And I felt like I've taken the journey with you on this, and so I feel good about where we are and what we've done, and I really want to thank you for the depth of that knowledge. Those are the things that I think benefit all of us as a council, and it really did make clear the urgency of our now that we're addressing and the urgency of need that's just desperately out there, and why we as council and as stewards of the public trust and funds are taking the steps we are. So really, I just wanted to commend, all of you for just a stellar presentation and the hard work I know went into all of this. Thank you.
Ms. Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I just want to reiterate that these are our people that we're talking about that are being helped and housed and served by the Housing Authority, by the Family Center, by the programs, by the county programs, and people are working their hardest with a lot of passion to help the others in our community, and that is the foundation of all of our concern, I believe. These are public health issues, these are quality of life issues, it's the future of what our city will look like. So the more that we increase our efficiency and our effectiveness and how we approach this work, the better it is for all of us going forward. And I just want to thank all the people that participated. Thank you, Council, for everyone's care and commitment to our citizens and to each other.
Ms. Cleland.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to Councilmember Walters. We participated in hours and hours of meetings with the public, and thank you to the public, thank you to service providers, thank you to various staff members within the city for participating, but the fact that Mr. Walters was able to articulate and explain in such a succinct way, I'm really appreciative that you got that across to the public, and it's been documented and it's available for folks to look at in the future. I just want to speak a little bit from a diff kind of to put this in context of what it felt like to be in those meetings. It was emotionally exhausting. It was very raw after you sat through an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours of meetings with professionals in these various fields saying they are doing everything they can and they cannot meet the demand. They cannot help the folks who are reaching out to them, and that they're at a loss for what to do too. For example, the social workers, there's a huge vacancy rate, but it's also it's not just because they can't hire, it's because people burn out, right? So I just want us to know that it's more than just kind of your basic or your routine committee, and I think that we're going to have more to bring to council. and I sit with people or I have lunch with folks and they bring up the homelessness issue. And I think that that is just that final visible step when we start to see the folks that are homeless. There is such a wide range, as Mr. Walters spoke about, of how folks can hide either mental or chemical abuse issues, and they go hand in hand, and and that we have to do what we can to intervene at the time of crisis as quickly as possible and provide those resources. Now, there's certain levels, right? There's certain things the city can do, there's certain things the county can do, and there's certain things that has to be statewide coordinated. But the fact that we're able to talk about it and the fact that we can now move forward with our various levels is really, really important. And I encourage anyone who wants to come to one of these study sessions, please do. The more people who hear about it, I think it's important that there's the component of education for our public, and that should come partially from I think the Housing Action Plan might see that happen. But this is a really kind of, I would say, almost a hidden issue or an issue that needs to come to light and be focused on a bit more. So thank you all for listening, and I hope if you have further questions, we can share what we've learned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walters.
I would just also add that, we're still meeting every week or every other week. Our agendas or our meeting links are on the website. I can't tell you that we got 100% of all of this right, especially in the behavioral health arena. It's incredibly difficult to find someone who can articulate the way the entire system works, and maybe that's part of the problem. But we have had great participation from the public, and we've now got a broader audience, given that we're at a full council meeting, and I hope anybody else who's got something to add, some additional insight, some other piece of data, will reach out to our Housing, Affordability, and Community Services Committee. You can find us linked off the Planning Department's website. Maybe come to a meeting or maybe shoot us an email. Thanks.
All right, that was great. Anything else for the good of the order tonight? Okay, with that, I'll adjourn the City Council meeting of 10 January 2022. Thank you very much.